Hello and welcome to another episode of the Project Purple podcast. I'm Dino Varley, founder and CEO of Project Purple, and we have another interview for you coming up with a very special guest after a few quick updates. 2022 was a record year for us, and we just want to thank everyone who made it happen, from our participants to our volunteers to our supporters, everyone who supported us in 2022. Thanks for the support. Help us make 2023 even better. So how do you do that? Well, currently we're recruiting for many of our fall events. Believe it or not, it's not even spring and we're already recruiting for our fall events, but they fill up quick. We recently just launched our New York City Marathon team, our Chicago Marathon team, along with our Berlin Marathon team. We also have other races available in spring as well. And locally here in Connecticut, we've got our golf outing coming up on June 5th. So if you love to play golf, we've got a great event for you at our Charity Golf Classic down at Shorehaven Country Club. If you own a business and can't meet us out there on the golf course, but love to sponsor the event, we've got plenty of sponsorship opportunities available as well. We also have many virtual events going on this year. First up is our Purple Patties virtual 5K happening St. Patrick's Day weekend in March. To learn more about all these great events happening here at Project Purple, visit our website at projectpurple.org and make sure to follow us wherever you are on social media to stay up to date on all things Project Purple. Without further ado, let's meet our special guest today, coming to us all the way from Avon, Connecticut. A little bit of a drive here from our home office in Seymour, probably about 45 minutes up beautiful Route 8. I guess you can go up 84. But pancreatic cancer survivor, Jay Buth. Welcome to the Project Purple podcast, Jay.
Thanks, Dino. Glad to be here.
And I'm excited to have you on. I say this a lot, but I'm being sincere here. I get excited when we have guests that are survivors. Your story, which we're going to get into, and I am going to tease it here a bit. You were supposed to be on the podcast a while back. You had a little bit of a setback, and it's exciting to have when your assistant reached out to me and said, Jay wants to be on the podcast. I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, I can't wait for this because I have been following your journey. Your assistant also, wonderful human being. She had sent me a couple emails, and I was following your journey. I think your wife created a link to follow. So I was getting some updates, and I'm excited to have you here. You look great. For those that are watching on YouTube, or will see some of our clips, but I know a little bit about your story. So I'm just really excited to have you here because I know this is a special thing for you. And I'm excited to share your journey with our audience. So with that, as is customary, our first segment here at the podcast is always our guest opportunity to kind of share their journey with pancreatic cancer. And as I said before we hit record, you can stay as high level as you want, or you can get in the weeds as much as you want. And with that, Jay, the microphone is yours.
Thanks, Dino. So I'll try not to bore everybody, but so my journey actually started in November of 2021. So I woke up one day and my urine was a dark color, and I just thought I was dehydrated. So I started drinking a bunch of water. It kind of, came back again the following day. And you really just don't think about it. It's just something you're just not thinking about. And my stomach had kind of been bothering me, a little bit of queasiness. I just gotten back from Atlanta, and the flight wasn't turbulent, but I was just kind of queasy before and after the flight. Just kind of strange things. And then on Thursday that week, I went out to dinner with friends, and then the next day I woke up and I looked like Homer Simpson. I was completely yellow from jaundice. And so I worked that day, and I figured I'd just go into the urgent care on Saturday. I figured I'd get like a vitamin D shot or something like that. I mean, my experience with jaundice was when I had, one of my kids was a newborn and had it, and you put them under a sun lamp, and, and that's all you do. And so I figured it was the same thing. So I walk in the urgent care, and the first thing they tell me is, you got to go to the emergency room. We can't help you at all, and this is serious. So went to the emergency room at UConn John Dempsey Medical Center. And, they did sonograms, they did a CT scan, and basically concluded that my bile duct had narrowed because of a lot of sludge they thought was in there. The pancreas looked normal. but they thought my gallbladder was the culprit. And sure enough, when they, we did a surgery, they went in to take it out, and my gallbladder was full of mucus. It wasn't holding bile like it was supposed to. It was contributing to a bunch of sludge and stenosis of the bile duct. And so they thought they found it. They put a stent in my bile duct to keep it open. And they basically said, hey, look, we think we fixed it. We did a CT scan, your pancreas. We didn't see anything. And, you come back here in early January, we'll take this stent out. We think that'll give it the bile duct sufficient, time to kind of be open and heal and all of that. And sounds good. And so on January 5th, I came back. They removed the stent from my bile duct. And they did notice a couple of lesions there. And they said, oh, you know what? We'll just take a couple of cell brushings on this and send them off to the labs. And, if anything comes back, we'll tell you. And those brushings came back as benign. But what happened the night of January 5th, my bile duct closed back up. The stent didn't keep it open. I was in extreme pain at this point, nauseous. I had to get my wife to take me back to the hospital. They readmitted me there at the hospital, and they did more sonogram work, and they did another CT scan. And that CT scan revealed something, quote unquote, something that was there. They couldn't tell. They thought it was small. They didn't know what it was, but they did say, based on some of the lab work that was being done, the blockage that was kind of closing the bile duct at this point was clearing itself. But they would go ahead and put in another stent, and then take some more brushings while they were down there. So they went in, put the stent in. That was January 7th. Took the brushings. And then on January 13th, I got the call that those came back as malignant with pancreatic adenocarcinoma. And what they wanted to do was they wanted to schedule what's called an ERCP EUS, which is an endoscopic procedure with a sonogram to basically identify and try to, mark where that tumor is, or the suspected tumor was. Because again, it wasn't very clear for them on the CT scan. So I think it was on the 17th, I went back in. I had that procedure done. They didn't do a biopsy of it. They had cells that were cancerous. They didn't want to hit the hornet's nest, so to speak. So they did confirm that it was at the head of the pancreas, and they wanted me to do a CT scan and a PET scan as well. So a CT scan with contrast and a PET scan. The problem was, and I am deeply thankful to UConn that they just kept looking, right? They weren't satisfied with not getting an answer, and they kept looking. But the problem with the state-run hospital is, hey, if you want to get the PT scan the PET scan and the CT scan, that's going to take about 3 to 4 weeks to get those done, and that just wasn't working for me. So I went to Hartford Hospital, and on the 25th. I got both the CT and PET scans done that same day. They were read by a surgeon at Mass General Brigham. I got an appointment to go see him on the 28th of January. His name was Carlos Fernandez del Castillo.
No, well,
who's a pretty well regarded guy. I was trying to find the number one guy on the East Coast, and luckily he was in Boston. So. Yeah,
we live. I know you're not from Connecticut, but I always tell people who either are from here or if you move here, yeah, we pay a lot in tax, but we've got pretty good access to healthcare, more so than people in other parts of the world, or even not even in the world, but here in the country, right? Like there's some parts of the country where we're 2.5 hours to Boston, 2 hours to New York, to some amazing centers. And there's some amazing doctors here in the state too, as well. I'm not trying to, but when it comes to a specialty like this, to your point, if you're 2 hours from Juan Carlos, you go see him.
Yeah, exactly. And I was looking around. I obviously I knew some people that were on the board of Mass General, and I called them up, and they helped me get in to see him that quickly. In the meantime, what I had been doing through a nurse navigator at UConn was to find a therapist. There's a huge mental health issue when you kind of, going through this diagnosis. And one of the things that I wanted to do was to find someone I could talk to about this. And luckily, UConn had a phenomenal therapist there named Dr. Judith Cooney. She works out of Farmington, Connecticut, and she's a breast cancer survivor. So it's great to be able to actually talk to a therapist who's a cancer survivor to help kind of go through things and help ground you. And that was really, I think the mental health aspect, it often gets overlooked, but it's just as important as everything else. So I met with, it was a Friday, it was the 28th of January. I met with Dr. Fernandez, and he basically told me, look, the train hasn't left the station. He was wondering why it hadn't been seen in the scan that was done in November. And he kind of pulled them both up together and looked at them and said, hey, look, if they knew exactly where it was and exactly what to look for, maybe you could see it. But he goes, you could barely see the faint outline of the tumor at that point in time. So, but he wanted to reassure me that the train hasn't left the station. He recommended neoadjuvant chemotherapy and chemoradiation in hopes of reducing the tumor. I was resectable from the start. I didn't have any blood vessel involvement right at the head of the pancreas where it's supposed to be. But he said they had much greater and improved patient outcomes at Mass General. If they did the neoadjuvant chemotherapy, which is the chemotherapy and chemoradiation prior to having the surgery, which is the true cure path, if you will, when it kind of comes to pancreatic cancer, which is the Whipple procedure, which is a pretty invasive surgery. Not that I think any surgery is not invasive, but it's right up there with open heart surgery, basically. So that was the 28th. He basically recommended. I asked him, I go, do I need to do chemotherapy up here in Boston? And he said, no, not the chemotherapy. I got a great guy down at Hartford Healthcare by the name of Ted Hong. So he referred me to Dr. Hong. I ended up calling Dr. Hong that Friday, got in with him the following Wednesday, which I think would have been February 2nd. He looked at everything, looked at the radiology reports. He obviously knew Fernandez from before. And, he basically looked at everything and said, based on where this is, you're stage 2B. The thought was you had a tumor that was 2.5 centimeters big, and it looked like to the radiologist that it had spread to one lymph node that was right below the pancreas. Dr. Hong had said, could be a reflection, could be other noise, but let's just go with that is, and we'll stage it 2B. On February 4th, I went to Hartford Healthcare, got a port installed. And on Monday, February the 7th, I started chemotherapy, the first of 8 rounds of chemotherapy. So every other week. So a total course of 4 months on the drug combination called FOLFIRINOX, which is a pretty powerful chemotherapy drug regimen. Didn't have any side effects. When you kind of go through chemotherapy, and I don't know if some of your guests have talked about this before, but they give you a ton of drugs beforehand, right? And so, one of the drugs they give you is the steroid called dexamethasone, which, you get 10 milligrams of it, and it makes you feel like you can bench press a car. It's incredible. And one of the things, my brother-in-law, who's a physician's assistant, his GI specialty, was kind of going through me with this on the journey, told me, he goes, hey, remember when President Trump got off after he got out of Walter Reed with the COVID and got off the helicopter and went up those stairs, they said he was on 24 milligrams of dexamethasone. So, I will tell you, you're just 10 milligrams, you're up for the night, right? So you go to sleep for the night and you feel empowered. So, I would do Wednesday through Friday would be my normal chemo days. Thursday, I wouldn't sleep Wednesday night. Thursday, I'd be at work and operating, very high functional. And you have your, you get the drugs on Wednesday, and then you go home with a pump. The pump, with one of the drugs called 5-FU, which is good because you like to give an FU to cancer, I think, at that point. So it's aptly named. But I didn't really have any side effects, which was great. I managed it really well. I was tired sometimes on Saturdays, but I'd just sleep in a little bit and be able to work out and exercise and eat and go to therapy and go to work. I was working the whole time while this was going on. I mean, I wouldn't, on the days that I was injected, I wouldn't be working. But if I had the pump, and on the days I got disconnected from the pump, I was working.
Jay, I want to jump in here real quick before we get to the next step here. Before 21, any health issues?
Yeah, it's a great question. No, I mean, I had a torn meniscus on my knee that I got repaired and my wisdom teeth out when I was 17. And that's been the extent of my health issues. So, I mean.
And you're a pretty active guy, it sounds like. I mean,
Yeah.
we always are the most aware of how our body feels, right? So
Yeah.
like if something's up, then we're going. But it's just interesting. I mean, we've heard about like GI issues, right? We've had females on that have said like, yeah, their urine was really just, something was wrong with it. Really, really dark. I think someone was like, yeah, it was like really brown. And they were like, yeah, this is not, it's like rust color, rust coming out, and you kind of think like, oh, that's not good. Something with the bladder, like, oh, something's not right. And, clearly you go there. And it's interesting, like this dialogue you had from the very beginning, because the gallbladder is always kind of like, and in this, I'm not trying to throw doctors under the bus here, but maybe this is part of that awareness piece that we have to continue to raise. Like the gallbladder is always I guess it is kind of the place of where this yellowing comes from, right? Like something's going on with the gallbladder. And similar experience with my dad. I had my gallbladder removed in 2018 as well. I had stomach issues. Like I was having these pains. My eyes turned yellow. So I freaked out. Go to the doctor. They're like, yeah, you have gallstones. You get like this sludge in your gallbladder. Just take it out laparoscopically and you're done. But we hear this often, from a lot of people. Like it's like when they they go there first. But my question is, let's get to the pancreas first, and then let's look at the gallbladder.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up, because I did talk with the head of surgery at UConn I go to church with. His name's Dave McFadden. Great guy. I mean, I love him to death. Family friend.
Yeah.
And I went and met with him about this, because I wanted to get his view on neoadjuvant chemotherapy, taking it out. Because he's the one, because he did tell me, he goes, look, we could put you on the table tomorrow. You're resectable.
Yeah.
But one of the things that he told me, kind of to your point, was, we thought it was your gallbladder. Thank God that bile duct collapsed after we took that plastic stent out, because if it had stayed open, you would have been coming in complaining about stomach issues, and we would have done some tests and put you on Pepsid, and you would have come back complaining about that. And by the time we figured it out, it would have been too late, because it's just not what they immediately reached for. It's funny. He said that one of the doctors that was in the hospital when I was back there in November, I thought this was cruel at the time, but one of the things she said was, we needed to do a CT scan to look to make sure you don't have cancer. Mm. And I was like, hey, you can't just hit me with that. I can't be with, jaundice, man.
Yeah.
Where's that vitamin D shot?
Yeah.
So, but looking back in retrospect, it's like, she was right. You should be, looking for other stuff as well. And to their credit, they looked at the pancreas, they didn't see anything, which led them then to the gallbladder conclusion. If they would have done a blood test like again, the CA19-9, I'm sure other patients have talked about that as a tumor marker. If they would have run that, they probably would have seen elevated levels, enough above normal that maybe that would have warranted some consideration. But sometimes, again, my understanding from talking to my oncologist is sometimes above normal levels could mean other inflammatory items there in the gut.
Yeah.
So it's not always a good predictor.
Yeah, and I know there's the the side of like anytime, like you mentioned that, the ERCP, like doing the brushing, right? Anytime you do any type of procedure, any type of test, there's always risk, right? So it's like this risk reward, I guess like putting someone through a CT scan or additional testing, like dropping, an EUS, like, going down, putting people under, there's risk, and then, going down. I mean, I've had EUSs, I've had colonoscopies. It's kind of the same thing, right? Like anytime you go under anesthesia or any type of, anesthetic and they start probing, anything can happen. People can perforate or tear or whatever, whatever can happen, or you can disrupt, cells and make things worse. So I guess, again, there's that risk reward here when it comes to it. I just don't understand why, like, to your point, like that nurse brought it up early, but then like the systems, right? Like this is a systems thing, right? Like we've got to, because we don't have early detection or we don't have definitive things. Like maybe the checklist we need to rearrange the checklist on what gets checked off before we go to the next, I guess is my point.
I would fully agree with that. I mean, having seen it live, and this is why there's such bad outcomes with the, unfortunately, with the diagnosis, because and some people, they're their own worst enemies. Like I know a fella who had the, the rust color, the root beer colored urine, and he just kind of let it go for about 3 or 4 months. Yeah. And by the time he goes and gets diagnosed, he's stage 3. Now he was operable, he was resectable. But still he's kind of kicking himself thinking, I let this thing go for so long.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's get back to you go through the 8 rounds of Fluranox. And then when do you go in to get the Whipple?
Yeah, so I went in July 15th. So the 8 rounds of Fluranox kind of ended on the end of May. I had a CT scan in the middle that showed the tumor shrunk from 2.5 centimeters into 2 centimeters. Wow. A CT scan at the end of the chemo said it was still the same size. It was stable at 2 centimeters, hadn't gone anywhere. And I got a 2.5 week break. And then I started chemo radiation up at Mass General. So I took a pill form of that 5-FU, that fluorouracil. So I took a pill form of that 3 in the morning and 4 at night. And then I basically went into Mass General, and they had a radiation machine that I got little tattoos on my chest where they look like freckles, but where it's centered the tumor. And then they did the radiation on that along with the pills that I took, and that was 2 weeks. So I did once every day for 5 days, not including the weekend. So 10 sessions in total. So that kind of took me through the end of June, and then I got a 2 week break, and then July 15th is when I had the Whipple procedure done.
Up at Mass General.
Up at Mass General, yeah. So during this time, and I guess by the way, the funny story that I have is my oncologist up at Mass General, or my radiation oncologist up at Mass General, is a guy named Tim Hong, and he's the brother of Ted Hong. So, I mean, not that I didn't know that was going to happen. I mean, I didn't know it was going to happen, but I had a strong sense they're going to put both brothers together for me, and again, they're both world renowned. They're both they're both great doctors. So. But yeah, so and I met with Dr. Fernandez. During that piece, we scheduled a Whipple procedure. July 15th comes. You're a little bit nervous because obviously it's a pretty big thing. But having the gallbladder out saves time on that on the surgery. But he performed the surgery. It got off to a late start, and they didn't inform my wife about that. So the anesthesiologist got tied up on a different case and was late getting over to start me. So they started me 2 hours late. Oh. And so as things went, like when it was supposed to be over and she was expecting Fernandez to come out and talk to her, he's still in surgery, and they just didn't give her the update that I started late. So she was worried. So what was supposed to start at noon started at right around 2:30. They didn't get done until 6:30, 7 o'clock. They were supposed to be done around 3 or 4. So yeah. But anyways, it was as Fernandez called it, better than textbook, better than perfect. It went really well. I tolerated everything really well. And as probably other people describe the Whipple, they take the duodenum or duodenum, however you pronounce it, pretty much out. And, you're left with a small valve at the base of your stomach, a small piece of your bile duct at the liver. And they took off 30%, the head of the pancreas. And then you basically just kind of, suture all that to the large intestine. And that's kind of my anatomically altered self now. So I kept my spleen. They took out 16 lymph nodes. The final pathology was basically the neoadjuvant chemotherapy helped shrink the tumor, actually deaden it. Pretty much the way Dr. Hong in Boston was describing it is, it's like if it rains in your driveway, right? As the sun comes out, you'll have this ring, right, where you had a larger pool, then maybe you have some smaller pockets or smaller pools inside that larger ring. That's kind of what it was. It was like, okay, the overall diameter didn't change because there was a quote unquote ring there. But the tumor itself was pretty much dead. Some live pockets when they pulled it out, but that's, that was the expectation. The pathology kind of confirmed that. They took out 16 lymph nodes, no cancer in any of them. So the final staging was stage 1. That was a 1B. Yeah. Yeah. So, and again, and this is where I got to give UConn all the credit. I mean, they would not take no for an answer. They kept digging and they kept digging to find this thing. And without their persistence, it could have been too late.
Jay, I had a question, and I'm sure that, knowing where you went, genetic testing, family history, like.
None. So my mother died of colon cancer.
Okay.
But however, she never got a colonoscopy after age 50. So she got one done at 50. She didn't like it. My mom was very stubborn and just decided, so she was diagnosed in 2018 with stage 4 colon cancer.
Okay.
And she passed away in March of last year. So that's when I was going through all this. She ended up passing away. I was there for her at the end and everything. I got my family there, for her and everything. But unfortunately, she didn't make it. But I mean, it's just it kind of, I think where you're going on this, is it gets back to early detection, and what can be done, to find this thing earlier. Sorry, I got sidetracked there thinking about my mom. I apologize.
No, that's okay. So, but when you went through this, they did genetic testing, I would assume, that the folks at Mass General didn't find anything.
No. So, well, they did genetic testing. The sample wasn't big enough. They did what was called a liquid biopsy.
Yeah.
The sample wasn't good enough. So it came back as inconclusive. That was done at UConn. I asked Dr. Fernandez if he thought I should do it. He said 95% of this is non-genetic. Don't bother. However, Dr. Hong in Hartford has referred me to genomic testing at Hartford Healthcare because he wants it done because, I have 2 girls and, I want to make sure that, they don't have to worry about this.
Yeah. I mean, statistically, he's, I'm not, Dr. Fernandez is right. But it ranges. It's like 5 to 10%. That's the range, right? So 95, he's saying 95%. He's right. He's spot on. But, some people, you could get tomato is my thing on that, right? There is a risk, right? There is an inherent risk if you have a BRCA mutation or Lynch syndrome, right? That we see often. BRCA is probably more common, the BRCA mutation. Given that you don't have like a strong family history of a lot of cancers, the one thing like colon cancer is part of the BRCA family, so potentially, and you're a young guy, so you just I think as humans, like we want to know, right? Like we want to know the answers. And this goes back to what you said about early detection. It's like, well, why don't we have early detection, right? Like this is the frustration from the community that I'm in, from the awareness factor, from the groups that are in the space trying to, raise awareness and help families get through the journey. It's like, all right, how can we get to, early detection? Like, what does that look like? And quite honestly, Jay, it's a blessing, like you said, that UConn was so adamant to try to figure this out early on. That doesn't happen in a lot of centers. I've heard stories, like I know a guy very well. He was in Florida and, he had some gurgling stomach pain, and he went to the ER, and the guy, the PA, I don't even know. I think it was the doctor, actually. The ER doctor was just persistent to figure out like what was going on. And they finally like sent the guy for a CT scan, and they found like a stage 1 tumor, so like that's it, but I could tell you from my experience, when I hear stories of like stage 1, early onset, like these types of cases, it's because there's someone in that scenario that's super persistent. And you know what? It's usually not the patient. And I'm not saying that in a bad way, because patients don't know. It's usually maybe someone in that medical field behind the scenes that just said, hey, let's just do this test to just rule this out.
Oh, you're spot on. And I'm a big advocate for myself. And once you get the diagnosis, your advocacy range goes up dramatically.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, back in November, I didn't want to hear if I had cancer or not. I want you guys to, just fix me. Oh, it's the gallbladder. Okay, great. I'm home for Thanksgiving and everything's fine. And December was great, and Christmas was great. And, January was kind of a, kick in the chops, so to speak. So
yeah. It's a kick in the chops for sure. So you have the surgery up at Mass General.
Yep.
Everything other than the everything coming out of the surgery was good. What was surgery post? Did you have to do more chemotherapy, or was it because of the margins and because of the staging, like it wasn't required?
Yeah, because of the margins and the staging. Because they got everything and there was nothing in the lymph nodes. They had concluded no chemo afterwards. So the original goal was, you meet with the oncologist every 6 weeks. In addition to the port flush, they would do some tumor marker testing. And then I would get scans starting every 3 months. Now, unfortunately, so I was in the hospital for 4 days after Mass Gen, and I was eating, going to the bathroom. Obviously you have 30 staples in your body, so you're not moving around great.
No.
But I was walking the halls and up and at them. You're up the next day. So I got discharged after 4 days, and during the convalescence, things were going well. We were planning to kind of go back. So my first visit with the oncologist was back in the middle of August. And, I complained about not being able to eat, lack of appetite, lack of strength overall. And again, he thought I was just dehydrated. So, put a bag of fluid in and, come back and see us, that was on a Friday. We'll do a bag of fluid. You come back and see us on Monday, see how things are. Or maybe it was a Tuesday, the following Tuesday. Come back the following Tuesday. Let us know how you are. Man, I came back that following Tuesday, and they were getting ready to access my port to put the fluids in. And I developed this huge chills where I was just shaking. And they concluded that there was something wrong with me. And they called an ambulance, and I went to Hartford Hospital. And what it turned out was I developed I call it post-surgical, but who knows where I got it. I developed a bacterial infection in my body that basically was collecting around pancreatic fluid that my body made a little pocket for, as well as bile fluid that my body made a pocket for. There were just leaks. There would have been minor leaks coming out of coming out of the surgery that the body would just normally have healed. However, the bacterial infection kind of prevented that from happening. So I get to the hospital, and I developed a GI bleed that was life-threatening. I went into cardiac arrest. And they're telling my wife, and if you watch kind of the Damar Hamlin incident or episode, the first thing they focused on when he kind of regained health that they were briefing everybody on the bottom of your screen was his neurological function appears intact. And that's what they worry about when you go into cardiac arrest. So cardiac arrest, the heart's trying to protect itself. So it realizes there's lack of blood flow, but what it's doing is cutting off blood flow to the brain and other major organs. So it can cause damage to them. They told my wife, he might not wake up. He might be a vegetable when he wakes up. They have to kind of brace her for this. Thankfully, I woke up fine, passed the neurological test. But then I was in the ICU for about 2 months because it was trying to figure out how to get all of this infected residual stuff out of me. And I had 7 drains at one point on my body to try to drain this excess fluid out of me. I ended up, when I got discharged to the hospital for special care as a rehab facility, I only had 3 drains on me, one collecting a remnant of pancreatic fluid, one collecting a remnant of biofluid, and then one that was actually in my large intestine that was collecting biofluid as well, just to kind of help things process better.
Man.
Sorry, go ahead.
So that happens in August of 22.
Yeah.
And then you're in their ICU for 2 months. So September, October.
Yep.
So what do you get out like end of October, beginning of November?
Mid-October is when I got out. I went in August 22nd, and I got out of the ICU on October 22nd and was discharged to the hospital for special care in New Britain. And I think I'm saying that right. Hard hit New Britain.
Yeah, hard hit New Britain. I'm from Bridgeport, so don't worry. I don't take offense.
I guess it doesn't matter, right?
Maybe the New Britain people get upset, but that's okay. That's all right.
Yeah, right. Right. But so and I was there for a month. I got discharged on November 22nd. So all total, it was a 3 months start to finish. I had to learn how to walk, learn how to, take care of myself, learn how to speak again. I mean, it was a tough thing.
So did you have a heart episode so you said you had this cardiac issue. So was it like a stroke almost? Like you're saying you had to learn how to walk. I mean, I know like if you're sitting in a bed, I mean, I think not everyone listening is going to understand this, right? Because I remember like I'm not trying to relate this, but relate to this standpoint. Like I remember I had knee surgery a long time ago and I was like bedridden for like a week. Like I just was in bed and trying to get up and like you don't use your muscles or anything. It's like really debilitating. So was it because you were in ICU for so long, or was it related to just the bacteria causing like a stroke or the cardiac episode or was it just like a combination of everything happening?
No, you're right. Your relational example is right. So I'm in that bed for 2 months. I lost 50 pounds. Wow. It was mostly muscle. And so I did in the ICU get out of bed and go to a chair. It required 4 nurses to help me. And you really have to think about how you're going to move your legs to try to help, walk over. But I had no balance whatsoever. I mean, you couldn't stand me up. I did do some steps with a walker there and walked around the hospital floor at one point. I was determined to get back up on my feet. But when you're in the ICU, it's you have all sorts of tubes and wires, and there's a catheter involved. I mean, there's all sorts of just crap on you. So they keep you in the bed and they turn you and bathe you in the bed, and I lost all muscle and balance functions basically because I was bedridden for 2 months.
So we got to relearn all that, relearn how to do everything, and so now you've been home since November. Here we are recording early February. Everything's been going the way it should be.
Yes. I mean, the way they describe my recovery is exponential. It's, and being home really helps. And, you're getting up and down. Again, even in the hospital for special care, I couldn't get out of bed unless I was doing PT, physical therapy or occupational therapy.
Yeah.
And so if you're not doing that, that's, only 3 hours out of your day. So if you're not doing that, the rest of the time you're sitting in bed. So you're doing exercises in there to strengthen things, but being home has helped dramatically because you're not confined to the bed.
So I hate to say this, Jay. So you had this like good experience with pancreatic cancer. Not that anything about it is good, right? But given you were textbook, like Dr. Fernandez said, right? And then you have this secondary thing happen to you. So it's almost, and where I'm going with this is like you mentioned mental health. One, I want to know how you continue to do that during this part of this journey. But two, so let me ask you that question. So did you still talk to the doctor? I think it was Connie?
Yep. Yeah, Dr. Cooney. Yep.
Dr. Cooney, during this time while you were in, well, I guess ICU is kind of hard to do that, but.
Yeah, I didn't talk to her when I was in the ICU. You're right. After about 2.5 weeks of being in the hospital for special care, we FaceTimed or we Zoomed. I think we Zoomed. We did a Zoom session, and frankly, my stamina wasn't there. So for me to do more than 15 minutes or 20 minutes was tough. But she recognized that. I mean, she was trying to figure out how I was and how I was doing and how the recovery was. And my wife was keeping her informed. But yes, but she has helped immeasurably. And as any therapist should be helping you immeasurably. When you're kind of going through a difficult time in your life.
So have you thought, I'm sure you have, but I shouldn't make assumptions. If you didn't start working with her when you decided to start working with her, you said, I'm looking at my notes, it was like right around the time that you went and visited MGH around the 28th of June that you connected with her. If you didn't do any of that work beforehand, would your experience that you experienced post been different?
I think so.
For you, mentally, yes, mentally.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, so I maintained a positive attitude, and I think a positive attitude helps. I mean, I viewed this as I've got to beat this. I just didn't see any other option, and I didn't want to focus on any other option. So with her and the tools she kind of gave me, I was able to kind of from a mindfulness standpoint, really keep focusing on the positive aspect as I was going through, the chemo radiation, and then the surgery. And then I was down in the ICU. I mean, they put me on Cymbalta because, I clearly was depressed. I mean, in a lot of instances, I hallucinated a lot of things. Mm-hmm. I was delusional at times, based on whatever meds or, however my body was reacting. And I was depressed. And so they put me on Cymbalta to kind of give you that even keel. But I did think of my time with Dr. Cooney when I'm in the ICU and about, okay, this is just temporary. I mean, it doesn't seem temporary because it's your reality at the time. And it's very surreal, by the way. But it's just temporary. And my wife visited, every day. I had a buddy of mine come up from Atlanta. My best friend, I've known the guy since 8th grade, came up from Atlanta to, see me, and it was tough, but you kind of make it through those little pieces with that hope, if you will, and strength that it gives you. And she definitely helped me when I was in the hospital for special care because she kind of helped reground me. But I can't tell you how many times I cried. How many times you cry about? I guess here's kind of how I think about it. It was a why me. It's survivor's guilt. It's a why me. Why am I lucky enough to have it found so early? But then I look at the corollary to that, and if they hadn't found it, I'd still be doing why me? Why didn't they find it early? Why am I dealing with this now and having to get things in order and embarking on a much more difficult journey?
Did you ever think mentally when you're in the ICU? Because what happened? I guess it is related, but it wasn't as if you were fighting the cancer. You were fighting this bacterial infection, which could be as bad as the cancer, right? Because it has the bacteria. I've known people, I've heard cases where people get these crazy bacterial infections and they don't make it, right?
Yep.
Did it ever cross your mind though? Like, hey, I just beat pancreatic cancer. I was textbook. I could do this, or I kind of see it like just listening, Jay. It's like, I think you and I talked about this off the air before. Like, I wouldn't be in this position if I didn't lose my dad. We wouldn't be talking.
Yeah.
If you didn't go through pancreatic cancer, beat it. It prepared you, maybe, some could say, for what you went through. And now you're on the other side, you beat it and you got through it.
Oh yeah, I fully agree with what you're saying. So, I was intubated, so I couldn't speak for a while. When they finally took that intubation tube out, and I had a tracheostomy done.
Yeah.
I was able to talk to the doctors, because it was touch and go. I mean, they were trying to prepare my wife that you might not make it. I mean, I had sepsis. I mean, the whole 9 yards. The Hail Mary was they had to do a dialysis on me, which, by the way, I found out was very invasive, as opposed to some of the other surgeries they did as well. But I told the doctor, there's a doctor, was a surgeon of my wife, and it's Dr. Lindsay Bliss, and she she saved my life. And I've thanked her for it. But I told her and my wife, they were in the room together, and I said, I wasn't going to let cancer beat me. I'm sure not going to let some, small bacterial infection, beat me. And because it's my oncologist calls it a miracle. I mean, it was very grave. I mean, to say it was touch and go for a while, they didn't know if I was going to wake up a couple times. I mean, I had 2 cardiac arrest events, basically, because of 2 separate bleeds.
So amazing. Amazing that you beat it. You're here, you're sharing your story, and inspiring others in your journey, Jay. Couple questions left here for you. So moving forward now, because of all this, how did that kind of change? Like, usually I think right away it's like 3 months or 6 months. So did this throw a monkey wrench into any of that screening and like direction and where you go now post, I'm done with pancreatic cancer?
Yeah, excellent question. So one of the advantages, quote unquote advantages of being in the ICU for 2 months and having this problem, I had multiple CT scans after the fact. And then I also had a blood clot filter placed inside me as well that they then wanted to take out in December. So I had another scan in December. Every single one of those scans, the pancreas was unremarkable. And so my oncologist was like, look, you've been irradiated enough. If it was going to come back so soon, we would have seen it.
Yeah. So
there's no evidence of disease. So I'm still going to monitor you, but I'm going to put you on a 6-month scan schedule now because you just had so many of them done that pointed to, the fact that it wasn't there. They did the blood test on my CA 19-9 and it's 13 right now, which is well within. It's supposed to be less than 35.
Correct.
Units per milliliter or whatever the piece is, and so I'm at a 13 right now. So I go back and I'll see the oncologist one more time for a 6-week checkup, but then I'm going to go to a 3-month visit with him, with Dr. Hong, and then a 6-month scan schedule. So my next scan won't be until first week of June of 2023. Yeah,
it's awesome. It's awesome. You mentioned your wife a lot. I know you mentioned friends. I can't fathom, what it's been like for your wife, but what has the support been from the community? And I know I mentioned your secretary. I mean, she was emailing me and said, please say prayers for Jay and was very open about everything that was going on. But the support I know work's been super supportive. Talk a little bit about that. What's that meant to you? Because I always say no one ever does this alone. But I don't think we give enough credit to those people that help us on this journey.
Oh yeah, and I think some of them don't even know they're helping. I mean, some positive comments and well wishes. I mean, they mean the world. And so is Caringbridge is where my wife set that update on, and the responses on there. It just helps. It helps ground you. It helps give you that positive energy. I have a very close cadre of college friends that, we've been friends for, 30 years now, or more than 30 years now, since the 80s. One of them calls me and he's all, I just want you to know, I've started, I drove down to my kids' colleges. He has 4 kids, 3 of them go to a similar college. And then one of them goes to another college in the Northeast. So one of them the 3 of them go to college down south. He goes, he lives outside of Philadelphia in New Jersey. He's all, I drove down there and took them all out to dinner. I just want you to know you're making a difference in my life. I get it now that every day isn't guaranteed, or the next day, isn't guaranteed. and I'm doing more things with my wife. We kind of let date nights go, and I'm bringing those back, and I'm seeing the other kid in the Northeast, and it's very meaningful, that you have that effect on people, and I've had other people tell me too that their perspective on life is changing now, and that's meaningful, and if I can be an inspiration that way to people that are going through their own journey, or to people that have come out the other side. I mean, it's a small group, and it's good. You don't want to be in the club, but it's good to be in the club. God willing, I got 20 to 25 Christmases left in me.
I love it. Someone listening to this podcast, Jay, maybe they just have been recently diagnosed. Maybe they know someone in their family. Given your journey, what are some of the things you would say, like, as advice? I know I often bring this question up, and I hate saying, like, what's the best thing? Because I don't think there's a best thing. I'm sure there's a plethora of things, but in your experience, what advice would you give someone listening that just got diagnosed?
The first thing I say is focus on your mental health. I mean, it's getting your mind right, or the toll it takes on your mental health is significant. So finding someone that can help you with that, I think is important. I think maintaining a positive attitude, no matter what stage you are, maintaining that positive attitude that you can beat this, because you can. I mean, modern medicine is catching up. There's clinical trials that are out there that you can try to avail yourself of. There's the FOLFIRINOX, that if you can tolerate it, that would be, a good thing. But I would suggest, reaching out and develop your support group, your support network, to help you maintain that positive attitude as well. I mean, with modern medicine right now, there's a host of things that are going on, and, kind of talking about our area, Dana-Farber, they want to make cancer just a chronic condition. You got to live with it. Maybe it's not a cure right now, but maybe we can help you live longer and productively and pain-free. And so I think checking them out, as well as the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota, I think, they're, or MD Anderson. I mean, I think there are places that, are really trying to help, and looking in the clinical trials there, I think, are important.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot happening. Selfishly, there's not enough, right? But, by continuing to raise awareness, continuing to share stories of hope and inspiration, we hope we inspire people that are in the disease to continue to fight, continue to raise money, support groups, and then more importantly, the people outside of the space. And that's something, you mentioned before, this is a rare disease, right? In theory, right? Yeah. We say in theory here, air quotes, if you're watching, I use these air quotes. I don't think it's rare, but I guess, yeah, statistically, when we compare it to other cancers, the federal definition, I don't even, that's a good, I need to look up what the federal definition that makes it a rare cancer, because it impacts, this year it'll be 64, it's almost 65,000 people, right? Which is still considered low when you compare it to breast cancer, lung cancer. But when we look at other statistics, it's high, right? We look at mortality, survivability, it's low survivability, high mortality. So, but we really got to inspire the outside, the people outside. And that's how we really create change. Because I've always said, if you look at breast cancer, my mom's a 2-time breast cancer survivor, so I don't feel guilty saying this. I love what they've done, but they get like 5 to 1, they get there's a lot of pink, and they've done great things. And I hope they continue to do a lot of great things. And my mom's alive because of all those things. But my dad, he's gone. And we need to do more for pancreatic cancer. If it would be great if there was this internal bucket of money, Jay, at the NIH that, every, cancer got $1 billion. Not to go political here, but, we've been handing out a lot of checks lately, and, I haven't seen cancer research go up. Maybe there's an idea of just like filling all the buckets for cancer research, and, let's just see what that does. Be interesting to see what $1 billion in every cancer would do. Who knows?
Well, it would be significant. It's funny too, because again, you don't want to get political, but you look at guys like Bezos that have $139 billion that, I mean, I'm sure he's, living paycheck to paycheck, but boy, if you could give, if you could tap that for, cancer research, disease research. I mean, you talked about that compassion for other people. I mean, unfortunately, it's a disease that it doesn't care who you are. I mean, Steve Jobs, Chadwick Boseman, Patrick Swayze, it doesn't care. Me, it doesn't care, who you are. But unfortunately, it doesn't get the light shine, the light shown on it quite as bright because, 7 billion people worldwide, there'll be about 500,000 people that will get pancreatic cancer this year. I mean, that's, unfortunately, it's
a low number.
Yeah, it's a low number, but the mortality rate is, unfortunately pretty high. It's in the 70s for 1 year survivability.
Yeah. But hopefully podcasts like this will hopefully inspire and help amplify, the message that we need more and we need people to get involved and we need help. Researchers all over the world need support from philanthropy, from private sources, from public corporations, from government, from pharmaceutical side, right? Pharma's got to do a better job. We need more pharma partners. Like, look what we were able to do with, COVID. I mean, there was billions, trillions, regardless of whatever your COVID beliefs are, this is not the podcast episode for that, but like, look what we're able to do, so it can be done. I just, hopefully it happens sooner than later in the cancer space. My last question for you here, and this is always a loaded question. There's no right or wrong to it, Jay, but given your experience, what you've gone through, how do you define the term pancreatic cancer? What's your definition?
It's that is a loaded question. My definition of it is something that's a bad diagnosis, but with hope you can get a good prognosis out of it. I mean, it's January 13th. It'll live with me forever for the rest of my days. You get that call from your doctor, and it's bad when the doctor is calling you. It's not the nurse to talk about the second set of cell brushings, and so it's a little 15 milliseconds of small talk, and then it's like, hey, well, bad luck here. I'm sorry to tell you that you have this, and the sunken feeling you get in the pit of your stomach over what to do about that. Can quickly change, if you got the right support network and if you get the right mental health, view on that. But, my definition of pancreatic cancer is survivability. It's don't give up. You can beat this.
I love it. It's powerful stuff. Jay, last thing here, someone listening, like I said before, they may be going through it. They resonated with you here, or want to ask you a question. Where's the best place for our audience to connect with you?
Yeah, my personal email, it'd be great. It's my name. It's jay.buth@gmail.com. And I'd be happy to talk to anybody going through this and with similar or with different feelings or aspects to it.
Awesome. Jay, thanks for allowing us to share your journey and for inspiring myself, our audience. Just awesome. As I said in introducing you, we had this podcast and I've been doing this podcast 6 years. People cancel from time to time, all the time. Stuff comes up, people get sick, they go through treatments, but, seldom do people reschedule. And like I said, your assistant shared the Caring Birds your wife set up. And so I did see what was going on. And when I saw the reschedule, I was like, oh man, this is going to be awesome. I'm so excited. And, things are going in the right direction. And I just can't wait to have them on the podcast and talk more about the journey. So appreciate you opening up for our audience and inspiring our community with your journey.
Well, thanks for having me, Dino. And I'm pleased to be here, and I'm pleased to be able to share that. And if I can inspire people or give hope to people, that's what I'm going for. So it's it's beatable. And, if you just keep that positive attitude, I know it sounds a little Pollyannish, but I'm telling you, it goes a long way.
Doesn't when you're the person who's gone through it, Jay.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Project Purple podcast. If you like what you hear today or what you watch on YouTube, feel free to share this episode. Make sure to follow us wherever you listen to podcasts. Follow us on our YouTube channel. And until next time, please be safe. That's a wrap of another episode of the Project Purple podcast.